Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
I'm Jason Miller. Tonight on the Evan Miller Report, Russia criticizes Canada for sending troops to the Ukraine. We have the latest out of the region tonight. Greece is also in talks with Russia to buy missiles for their S-300 systems. This, according to Reuters and the RIA news agency. We have the concerning details. Coalition has failed as the Israeli government talks expand to the left, according to a recent report. Saudi Arabia beheads a drug trafficker, causing controversy, according to Amnesty International. And Curtis Ellis from WorldNet Daily joins us tonight to talk about the possible fast track of the Transatlantic Pacific Partnership. I'm Jason Miller. Corey Evan is off tonight. The Evan Miller Report for this Wednesday, April the 15th, 2015 starts right now.
Live from Southern California, this is the Evan Miller Report. Jason Miller with news and politics, Corey Evan with business and entertainment. This is the Evan Miller Report on SHR Media and Pundit Press Radio. Here now, Jason Miller.
And a very good evening once again on this Wednesday, April the 15th, 2015. I'm Jason Miller, and as I stated earlier, Corey Evan is off tonight. We'll be back on the broadcast tomorrow. Welcome to the Evan Miller Report, your conservative news source. Got a lot of news to get to tonight, including our interview with Curtis Ellis, political consultant and reporter for WorldNet Daily. He joins us at 8:15 Eastern, 5:15 Pacific Standard Time, right here on the SHR Media Network and Pundit Press Radio. And once again, we welcome you to the program tonight, and we start off over in Europe, over in Russia tonight, where they have called Canada's decision to send up to 200 military trainers to Ukraine is counterproductive and deplorable today. Tuesday, Canada announced 200 soldiers will be posted in western Ukraine, joining the U.S. and British soldiers early this summer. The mission will last until March 31st, 2017. Britain is sending up to 75 military trainers. The U.S. has committed 800 troops to train 3 battalions in western Ukraine. The move comes after a request from the government of Ukraine. The Russia embassy in Ottawa said in a statement that Canada's actions are fueling a military buildup. It does not help in any way the settlement of the internal fractional conflict in that country, the embassy said, while foreign ministers of France, Germany, Russia, and Ukraine called for enhanced intra-Ukraine political dialogue. It is neither appropriate nor helpful to assist the military buildup, playing into the hands of a party of war in Kiev, the statement added. Canada's Defense Minister Jason Kenney said the diplomat sends Russian President Vladimir Putin a message of resolution and deterrence. Kenney emphasized the troops will be far from the conflict zone. About 150 soldiers will be housed at a NATO training center in Yavork near the Polish border. Kenney also said between 25 and 30 troops will also be stationed at the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense demining center in Podolsky, also in western Ukraine. Canada is home to more than 1 million people of Ukrainian descent. Staying in Russia tonight, where the country of Greece is now negotiating with Russia for the purchase of missiles for its S-300 anti-missile systems program and for their maintenance. Russia, according to Russia's RIA news agency, quoted Greece's defense minister Panos Kamanos as saying on Wednesday. The report followed a visit by Greek Prime Minister Alexis Tsipras last week to Moscow, where he won pledges of Russian moral support and long-term cooperation, but no fresh funds to help avert bankruptcy for his heavily indebted nation. NATO member Greece has been in possession of the Russian-made S-300 air defense system since the late 1990s. RIA quoted Kaminos as saying, "We are limiting ourselves to a replacement of the missiles for the system." There are negotiations between Russia and Greece on the maintenance of the systems, as well as for the purchase of new missiles for the S-300 systems, he said. Meanwhile, the Greek Defense Ministry in Athens later issued a statement quoting Komenos as saying the existing defense cooperation programs will continue and there will be maintenance for the existing programs. No other details were immediately made available. It was unclear, sorry about that, folks. We'll move on to our next story. Over to Israel now, in the Middle East, where Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, tasked 3 weeks ago with forming Israel's next government, fell short today of striking a coalition with his right-wing partners after reports emerged of talks with the center-left party. Netanyahu's right-wing Likud party, of course, won Israel's March 17th election, but without a majority, and President Reuven Rivlin gave him until April the 22nd to form a coalition, as stipulated by the law. If he fails, Netanyahu can request an additional 2 weeks. Public television in Israel reported on Monday that Netanyahu and Isaac Herzog, who heads the Zionist Union Party and was Netanyahu's main challenger in the election, had met secretly to discuss the possibility of a national unity government. Both factions have denied such a meeting has taken place. Herzog has not explicitly ruled out a unity government, but said his party would form part of the opposition. For his part, Netanyahu said he would not form a unity government, but instead bring his natural right-wing and ultra-Orthodox parties into a coalition. But a Wednesday morning report in a Marine newspaper quoted a Zionist Union official as confirming the Netanyahu-Herzog meeting. And stay with the Evan Miller Report. We'll keep you up to date on the latest regarding the situation with that coalition government in Israel. Moving on to Saudi Arabia, where they have beheaded one of their citizens for drug trafficking, adding to what Amnesty International has called, quote, a McBride spike in the kingdom's executions this year. The sentence against Khilad al-Raleigh was carried out as Jakarta summoned Saudi Arabia's ambassador over the execution a day earlier of an Indonesian domestic worker for murder. Raleigh was convicted of smuggling aptidine pills and was executed in the northwest region of Jawaf, according to a statement from the Interior Ministry carried by the official Saudi press agency. He was the 61st person executed in the kingdom so far this year, after 87 death sentences carried out in the whole of year 2014, according to current AFP news agency tallies. Some 2,200 Romanian, U.S., British, and Moldovan troops will take part in military exercises in Romania, close to the Ukrainian border, beginning this week. Of course, we brought you that story earlier about the Canadians joining the Ukrainians. Well, but back to this story. Wind Spring 15 will start officially tomorrow and continue until April the 30th at 2 locations in eastern Romania. The Melkaling Air Base near the Black Sea port of Constanța and Smarden shooting range. Defense Minister Murda Doska said Wednesday that Romania will stage more than 340 exercises this year, mainly jointly organized, with NATO partners from the EU. On Wednesday, Romanian soldiers tested their readiness at Smarden, about 155 miles north of Bucharest, and went through a practice run ahead of 2 weeks of exercises. Staying in the European Union, where the European Parliament has backed a motion on Wednesday that calls the massacre a century ago of up to 1.5 million Armenians by Altish Turkish forces genocide. Of course, we brought you this story about Pope Francis triggering the fury in Turkey yesterday. Although the resolution repeated language previously adopted by the Parliament back in 1987, it could stoke tensions with EU candidate nation Turkey. Of course, Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan said even before the vote took place that he would ignore the result. After the vote, the Turkish Foreign Ministry accused the European Parliament of attempting to rewrite history. Muslim Turkey agrees that Christian Armenians were killed in clashes with autonomous forces that began on April the 15th, 1915, when large numbers of Armenians lived in the empire ruled by Istanbul, but denies that this amounted to genocide. Over to British election news now. Nick Clegg has said no party will win an outright election victory and warned voters that they face a choice between the Lib Dems, the SNP, and UKIP over who holds the balance of power. Lodging his manifesto, the Lib Dem leader said he would seek to form a coalition with conscience that would not lurch off the extremes. He has pledged more than 2.5 billion British pounds for education after a 2017 to boost opportunity. The Conservatives and Labour have both insisted they can win on their own. Meanwhile, UKIP leader Nigel Farage published his own party's manifesto on Wednesday and has rejected suggestions he made approaches to Conservatives about a post-election deal, saying he would only be speaking to the British people between now and May the 7th. Mr. Farage suggested a referendum on the UK's membership of the EU and would be the main red line in any negotiations with another party, saying it would have to be a full, free, and fair vote rather than a stitch-up. Speaking in South London, Mr. Clegg declined to specify any red lines, but said he would die in the trenches to defend the party's 5 key priorities on education, health, tax, the deficit, the environment, if it stayed in the government. And folks, on that note, we're going to go ahead and take a short break. When we come back this evening, we'll have our special guest tonight. Curtis Ellis will be joining us and talk to us about the possible fast-tracking of this Trans-Pacific Partnership deal in Congress. I'm Jason Miller. You're listening to the Evan Miller Report, and we'll be right back after these messages.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
How you doing? John Grant here. When I'm not slaving over a hot microphone on the 405radio.com Saturdays at 10 a.m. Eastern, I check out Sean and Clint here at Sackheads Radio. We all appreciate the best political bloggers, writers, and commentators. We either get them on our shows or we make fun of them, as it should be. So check us out live Saturdays at 10 a.m. Eastern or forever on the podcasts on the 405radio.com.
This is Tammy Jackson, inviting you to join me on the Tammy Jackson Show every Tuesday night at 7 p.m. Pacific on the 405radio.com. Put down that remote and tune into the show that covers politics, guns and the Second Amendment, religious liberties, sanctity of life, the military, and more. I host newsworthy guests and work hard to be a conservative radio show that's not like all the others. So save Tuesday nights at 7 p.m. Pacific for me, Tammy Jackson, on the 405media.com.
Hello, I'm Paul, a student at Hillsdale College. Here is my professor, Dr. Larry Arnn, on the separation of church and state.
America's founders believed in the separation of church and state, in that the country was not to have an official religion or an official sect. But that did not mean that government was to be hostile to religion, or even indifferent to religion, as many today argue. In fact, America's founding document, the Declaration of Independence, includes both a reference to God as the author of the laws of nature and a confident assertion that human beings are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. Far from being hostile or indifferent to religion, America's founders understood the theology of the Declaration to be an essential part of the education of citizens.
This Constitution Minute was brought to you by Hillsdale College. To join the national conversation on the Constitution, go to constitutionminute.org.
Hi, this is Rooster from Outcry Radio. Catch me here on Blog Talk Radio every Saturday night at 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Or follow my blog. Now, back to the Sackheads.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
Here's radio.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
Let's get back to the Evan Miller Report on SHR Media and Pundit Press Radio.
And welcome back to the Evan Miller Report. I'm Jason Miller. Corey Evan is off tonight. He will be back on the broadcast tomorrow. It started back in the Clinton era, back in 1995, when he joined the new 1995 New Transatlantic Agenda with the European Commission. At the November 9, 2007 meeting, a joint report stated progress in the following areas: removing barriers to trade and investment, easing regulatory burdens in various policy areas, including drugs and disease control, the importation into the EU of U.S. poultry treated with pathogen reduction treatments, federal communication commissions, and allowing suppliers to create declarations of conformity for products, uniform standards for electronic products, and agreements on standard for fewer biofuels. Orlene Kurla, SHR Media's global affairs correspondent, in her book By Stealth and Deception, said in her book that predicted that in 2015 that the House of Representatives, along with the President of the United States, would try to pass the Transatlantic Pacific Partnership. Well, sure enough, it looks like Congress may be fast-tracking this bill for the Transatlantic Pacific Partnership. Kurt Ellis is a political communications consultant and writer for WorldNet Daily. In previous lives, Mr. Ellis was a writer and producer for the CNN program Lou Dobbs Tonight. He's also been a producer for NBC News, CBS News, and a reporter for Associated Press Radio. He joins us now to discuss this further. Good evening, Curtis.
Good evening. Thanks for having me.
Pleasure having you with us tonight on this. And, foreign policy happens to be a favorite topic of mine to research. So in researching this book today, I've been reading our aforementioned analyst Orlene Kurla's By Stealth and Deception book, The Transformation and Its Parallel to the European Union. And surprisingly enough, I did some research today into this. And I am not shocked, but yet not surprised that we have the likes of many Republicans on this issue of this transatlantic Pacific partnership. This is just not a Democrat issue. This is both a party issue that both want to happen. Tell us why this would harm America.
What this is a direct attack on our sovereignty and our independence as an independent nation. We're seeing a slow drift towards economic integration. They want to, the people behind these plans, they talk about free trade, but it is not free trade. This is a combination of big business working hand in glove with big government to basically provide special favors to the crony insiders, to the big business insiders on Wall Street, the guys who got the billion-dollar bailout, and to some of the favored large corporations like General Electric, people like that, big surveillance in Silicon Valley. Now, what has been the hallmark of American civilization has been a broad-based prosperity with a large middle class of small businesses, of people owning their own business or working for someone they know, in family-sized enterprises. When you get into these big corporatist-sized enterprises, you lose the personal connection. You've got a few people on top who do very well, and everybody else gets paid peon wages. But now it's moving beyond that onto a global scale, where you've got this government thinking not in terms of what's good for America, but what's good for the corporatist bottom line. And these corporations, the days, let's put it this way, the days of what's good for General Motors is good for America, those days are gone, long gone. These corporations are now basically stateless entities, which is how they describe ISIS and Al-Qaeda, a stateless entity. It's not, they're not married to any states, any nations, and these corporations are not married to any nations. They go shopping around the world looking for the best tax rate they can find, the best labor rates they can find, the best deal they can get for resource extraction. They're all flocking to China because the Chinese government gives them subsidies, builds them free factories, So then they start building the iPhones in China because they get a free factory, free land, low-interest loans from the government. Then they export those goods to America. They used to make Apple computers in America, but when the Chinese government started giving them special favors to go over there, they go over there. They don't care if it, if it messes with the California workforce. So what we have here is this government corporate combine that is working for the good of these corporations that have no loyalty to the United States. And who gets crushed in this combine? The American worker, the American people, the folks that used to be able to earn enough with one wage earner to support a family, so that maybe the wife would volunteer as a youth minister, and they'd have enough money to buy a car every few years, go on a vacation, have somebody home to raise the kids. Now you've got two wage earners out there barely making enough to scrape by. Nobody's watching the kids. The kids are sniffing glue or on drugs or something, and nobody has time to volunteer for the little league, or take their go to Sunday school even. It's a terrible situation, and it's part of this globalization. What we have here is Go ahead. I'm sorry. I was saying what we have here is, people don't pledge these corporatists, the people behind these deals like the Trans-Pacific Partnership. They don't think in terms of the United States of America. I used to pledge allegiance to the American flag. They pledge allegiance to this thing called the global economy.
You're certainly right, and we are seeing the failure of as they say, the globalist agenda over in the EU right now. We just have to look at the country of Greece, a perfect example of it. They're in debt, and all the minority EU countries are now being forced by the head EU country, Germany, to have to bail out Greece because the Greek government, who is in charge, decided to misspend all of Greece's money. And so, who gets to pay the price? Not the Greek people, not the Greek government per se, but the people within the European Union. We've also seen it according to Orlane Kurla in her book Stealth and Deception, the test of the African Union, more predominantly the East African Union, and how that has been tried and it has failed.
That's right. Look, everywhere people want they want some local control, they want local say-so, and the larger and larger these combinations get, whether it's the European Union or some transatlantic union now or the proposed North American Union, you're getting further and further away from local control and accountability. And it doesn't matter whether it's the private sector or the public sector. It's the same thing. The same dynamic goes on. If you've got a giant corporation that's headquartered in Geneva, run by stockholders from Tokyo, they don't give a darn about the people, about the employees in Flint, Michigan, right? But if you've got a locally owned business in Flint, Michigan, where the owner of the business, his kids go to the same school as the employees in that business, you're going to have a different dynamic. People start looking at people as people instead of as units, economic units and cogs and some type of balance sheet and bean counter spreadsheet. It's and you see it as you were saying, you see it in the public sector with these giant things like the European Union, the East African Economic Unity Forum, and now we have this Trans-Pacific Partnership, which would merge the U.S. economy with 11 countries in Latin America and Asia. And as John Kerry said, it is the next stage in NAFTA. They want to merge our economy, and that's
I'm glad you bring up NAFTA, Curtis. You read my mind on this because most people thought NAFTA was defeated, that NAFTA was an old bill of former President George W. Bush, and thought that President George W. Bush tried to press it. People weren't excited about it. Matter of fact, they were so against it, he decided to drop it. And it's been a big fight, and was one of Phyllis Schlafly's biggest accomplishments, being the president of Eagle Forum, trying to defeat that. But NAFTA was actually passed. It's already been implemented. We're already part of NAFTA as far as Canada and Mexico goes, as part of NAFTA goes. I want to read you some statistics here, at least for the audience. I'm sure you know this, Curtis. In Mexico, their trade deficit went from $9 billion to $19 billion after 4 years of being part of the EU Free Trade Agreement. Also, the country of Chile lost over 70% of its mining exports. They are now being handled by foreign companies. So this shows failed EU policy, and I'm just mentioning two countries, one being Mexico, which is right next door to North America, and the other one being Chile, which is over in South America. We're already seeing it failed in our neighbors. Why in the world would our House of Representatives would even want to think of trying to do this? And I know Speaker John Boehner is on the list of those Republicans that actually support this bill.
Yeah, that's right, and so is Majority Leader Mitch McConnell in the Senate. They support this. They not only support these so-called trade agreements, like the Transatlantic Partnership and the Trans-Pacific Partnership. They want to fast-track it. They want to give President Obama these vast new powers called Trade Promotion Authority, which would strip Congress of its ability to thoroughly vet and debate the bill, to read it, and to amend it. And it would require a simple majority vote in both houses of Congress to approve it, not the two-thirds majority, two-thirds supermajority in the Senate that treaties are supposed to require. So, yes, John Boehner and Mitch McConnell are enthusiastic supporters of this. And by the way, so is Paul Ryan, who's chairman of the Ways and Means Committee in the House of Representatives. They want to move this thing through before people even know what hits them. And once it goes through...
In your research, pardon me, Curtis, in your research for the story, how do you gauge the presidential candidates on this? Now, I could pretty much ascertain that former Florida Governor Jeb Bush is a supporter of this, considering that his brother, former President George W. Bush, was the one who wanted to pass this NAFTA treaty.
That's right. Jeb Bush is in favor of it. He's spoken out in favor, saying he's in favor of it. Rand Paul is a bit on two sides. He said he likes free trade. He's not quite sure about this fast track Trade Promotion Authority, but he likes free trade. And Ted Cruz is for it. He said he loves free trade so much that he's willing to give Obama more power to make it happen. Now, I talked to Ted about this.
This is news to me, Curtis. So Ted Cruz, who is considered right now America's darling Tea Party conservative, and I've been critical of Ted Cruz before, ladies and gentlemen, so this isn't the first time. So if you're surprised by me in criticizing Ted Cruz, you're listening to the wrong radio program. But Ted Cruz, in support of this is going to be a shocker to certain Tea Party conservatives who are interested in Ted Cruz.
That's right. Now, I talked to Ted. I saw him down in South Carolina, and I said, Ted, look, you can be for free trade, but make no mistake, this Trans-Pacific Partnership ain't free trade. But more importantly, giving the president this fast-track power is a complete abrogation of congressional responsibility, congressional oversight. It's a dereliction of duty on the part of Congress, and it's a terrible. It does violence to the Constitution. So if you want to get out there and say you're for free trade, you think it's great to have more trade with other countries, great. But you can be for free trade and be against fast track. Now, all I know is he didn't listen to me, and it's a matter of public record. It's well known and been well documented that Ted Cruz's wife, who works as a partner at Goldman Sachs, she was a member of the Council on Foreign Relations on the very committee that endorsed the idea of a North American Union. So,
we saw Orlane Kurla, our SHR Global Affairs correspondent, Her and I have always talked about the Council of Foreign Relations. If you're part of that Council of Foreign Relations, that's a receipt for bad news right there. So that's disturbing, ladies and gentlemen. See, it's good we're having this segment tonight, and it's just happening right before the presidential primaries, Curtis, because now people can look and vet these candidates. Because you know what? I'm not going to tell you how to vote, people. You, the American people, have to do the research on who you can vote for this presidential primary. And right now, and I'm speaking in my own honest journalistic opinion, if Ted Cruz is in support of this, and he's in support of bringing down the U.S. economy and taking away your job, I wouldn't be voting for the guy. I'm just saying.
Really? Now, one thing that's included in this Trans-Pacific... I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Finish your point.
I was going to say something now. This is a real shocker. What's in this Trans-Pacific Partnership? One of the things, I mean, it's been kept secret. It's been negotiated by Obama in secret over the past 6 years. What we've learned is from leaks. But here's something interesting. The administration's own trade representative, the USTR, U.S. Trade Representative, says on the website that one of the key features of the Trans-Pacific Partnership are temporary entry guest worker visas. So this would...
let's talk immigration. I'm ready for this one.
Exactly. It's immigration. Temporary entry guest worker visas so that corporations will be able to bring employees into this country at will. And Milton Friedman said there's nothing more permanent than a temporary government program. So when they start talking about temporary entry visas, you know how temporary that's going to be. It's as long as they want them here.
Yeah. Can you explain to us a little bit about this L1 visa program? Because looking at this information, this has to do with U.S.-South Korea deal on this. And then next after that, I want to bring up healthcare briefly.
Right. So the L1 visa, it's a classification, a category of visas for what's called intra-company transfers. So if I'm a corporation and I have a branch in South Korea and a branch in America, let's say Samsung. Samsung has headquarters and factories and offices in South Korea, and they have offices and facilities here in the U.S. If I work for Samsung, or I can move back and forth between those two facilities at will. I don't need a special visa. I need under an L1 visa program. The company can move me back and forth, and the U.S. government can't say, "I'm sorry, you can't go." So let's put it this way. In the old days, you would want companies investing in America and building factories in America, building facilities in America so they could hire Americans. But with the L1 visa, the company no longer has to hire Americans. They can just bring people in from other places. And it's maybe better for the corporate bottom line, but what does it do for this country? What does it do for the American people? It doesn't do anything for us. It just makes it easy for the corporations to move people around on the checkerboard of the world stage, but it doesn't do anything for that country. Now look, China, if an American company goes into China, the Chinese government says, okay, first thing you have to do is you have to hire Chinese citizens and provide jobs for our people. Second thing you have to do is you have to turn over the blueprints for all of your products and tell us how to make it. That's the cost of entry. That's the cost of admission if you want to get into the Chinese market. Meanwhile, our government is saying, hey, you want to open a branch in America? Fine. You want to bring your people in? Fine. That's great. We just love to have you here. You don't have to train Americans to do these jobs anymore. Just bring your own people in. So it's a fool's game, and we're being played for the sucker.
You bring up the economy, which was to be my next question to you, Curtis. If this is to pass and this transatlantic partnership is passed, will this in essence merge all of our economies together? So, look, for example, and I don't pretend to be a business major. That's more my co-host's expertise than I am. But I'm just saying, if the Chinese yen right now, not exactly doing well. Chinese economy is actually slowing down, not picking up. So if the Chinese have a bad day on their stock market and their yen goes down and we're part of this deal, does that affect the U.S. economy as well?
Oh, you see, yeah, exactly. And that's the danger of going towards this integration, this economic integration that seems to be the holy grail for these globalists and these global corporatists. They want this smooth, integrated, harmonized, frictionless integration of economies all around the world. Well, what happens then is if China catches a cold, America gets pneumonia. You want some gaps between these economies. You want some independence. We don't want a one world economy where you then have a global recession. You want to have some independence and sovereignty and a little space between the operations here. So that if that's what's happened, as you said, that's what happened in the European Union. So you've got a problem in Greece, and now the whole European Union is in a mess. Before it used to be, before they had this economic integration in Europe, if Greece had a problem, Germany would do fine. France was on its own. Spain was there, and Portugal did what it wanted to do. Now everybody gets sick at once. It's like Ebola, where everybody's in the same house.
Absolutely right. And you mentioned healthcare, which is going to be my next question to you. Ladies and gentlemen, we sort of got the sight that this might have been happening back in 2009. Do we remember the night when the joint U.S. House and Senate, which was controlled by the Democrats at the time, passed the healthcare bill along with the Republicans? Why do you think the Republicans went for the healthcare bill? It had to do with this transatlantic Pacific partnership. Am I going somewhere with this here, Curtis?
You're going down the right track here. Look, you've got the same corporate cronies at work. They're all feeding at the same trough here. Notice that when Obama was pushing Obamacare, who did not speak out against it? The U.S. Chamber of Commerce, they didn't come out against it. The insurance industry, they didn't come out against it. The pharmaceutical industry, they didn't oppose it either. Now, you've got this trans-Pacific, transatlantic partnership. This is the payback. Because under the deal being negotiated, that was negotiated in secret by the Obama administration, they get rewarded. The pharmaceutical industry is going to get extremely long patent protections for their drugs. It's going to eliminate generic drugs, take them off the market. Those will be considered a copyright violation under the terms of this treaty on a global scale. And the insurance industry these countries that are part of these trade deals are being forced to open their market to the American insurance companies. So they'll be able to sell policies and start raping the people over there with their insurance deals. So those two sectors, which sat by quietly and pushed the Republicans and pushed the Democrats to approve Obamacare, now they get their payback through these deals. That's the kind of corporate cronyism, and those are the kind of deals that were cut in Washington. We're now seeing the other shoe drop. And that's why we call this Obama trade. They had Obamacare, now they get Obama trade.
Okay, you have a couple more minutes, Curtis, or do you have another pressing interview? Because I do want to talk a little bit more about this with you.
I've got 5 more minutes. I'd be happy to talk with you. Okay,
great. I'd like to talk about Boehner urging the U.S. Senate to pass the House's Medicare doctor pay bill. Now, we know conservatives have been skeptical about this Medicare bill. Everyone's been skeptical about Medicare and how that is going to be continually to be funded, as well as our Social Security, because our Social Security is probably 95% used up, if not already used up, by the politicians in Washington already. How much will this Medicare bill affect Americans if this is allowed to pass?
Well, it could affect them pretty dramatically. I mean, what we're seeing with the Medicare is that it's being slowly turned into Medicaid, and it's going to see a decline in services. The services and the care that's available is going to be getting worse, so that everybody's essentially going to be getting Medicaid. Medicare is being turned into Medicaid, and it's being used to finance Obamacare, so that more people will be given worse medical service. And this, again, as we were saying before, this is part of the concentration of power in Washington. You have now centralized healthcare decision-making in Washington. And it's beyond one size fits all. It's now one cast fits all. So no matter what part of your body gets broken, they're going to put you in one cast. It used to be that local doctors could make decisions, and there's plans out there to let the different states make decisions as to what medical care should look like, and how healthcare dollars should be spent. But these guys in Washington, Democrat, Republican, they jealously want to guard that power and keep it in Washington, keep the decision-making in Washington. And what's happened is naturally, as you see the consolidation of power and consolidation of services in fewer hands, doctors are going out of business. They're going to work for hospitals. That's the only way they can put up with all of the insurance paperwork that's an absolute requirement now under Obamacare. They just can't do it on their own. The independent doctor is going to go the way of the Model T Ford.
Well, it's been suggested, and I've talked to some people in my audience, that when they use their health care coverage or go to the doctor for just a general visit, that now the doctor's offices, because the insurance companies won't cover that doctor's visit, are now turning it back on their employer and filing workman's comp papers on them. This is ridiculous.
Oh my God!
Yeah, I know. This is just the start. This is just the start of this. And this is people, Blue Dog workers I've spoken to, who actually work in the labor unions, who supposedly got an exemption, per se, Curtis, that they wouldn't be taxed because of this healthcare bill, considering they're already part of their own little set of exchanges. So it's ridiculous. But before we wrap, I want to get your opinion on on weapons. But first, tell us how much of a threat, because it's been suggested that if this transatlantic partnership passes, that our healthcare will be put in charge of the World Health Organization. And the World Health Organization, Curtis, according to my research, not the most reputable organization when it comes to your health.
No, exactly right. Yeah, these transatlantic and trans-Pacific partnership have in there, basically what they're doing is it's setting up UN-administered panels on everything from investments to healthcare regulation. It'll further empower
death panels, correct?
Yes, exactly. Death panels and life panels, and we have the Codex Alimentaris, which writes the impure food standards, and so we'll have these worldwide standards for what kind of food, what constitutes healthy food, what they call healthy food, you would call unhealthy food. And if you try to have higher standards than what this World Health Organization or UN-administered panel sets as a standard, you're not allowed to do that. It's considered a barrier to trade. It's considered illegal. You're going to have. It's like socialism. Everybody gets lowered to the same level. We're all equally poor. There are.
So the FDA would become the world FDA in essence, because the world would be people representing the world, being part of the UN or the World Health Organization, what have you, would be in charge of the nation's food supply, what you eat, what you consume, and what you buy every day inside your local grocery store.
That's right. And when this UN panel determines that you shouldn't be able to buy vitamin supplements because they don't work, under their brilliant assessment, these are, useless and don't work, you will not be able to buy vitamins. You will not be able to buy food supplements. You will, if they set a standard that says it's okay to use sewage and industrial sewage to fertilize fields, that's the way all the food's going to be made. And if you try to set a standard that says you can't do that, say, I'm sorry, you're in contravention of this global standard. You can't do that. You can't tell people that the vegetables they're buying have been grown in fields that have been fertilized with industrial sewage.
Wow. All right, I know we're running out of time. Real quick for us, we know that the country of Japan is supposed to be allowed to get its military back under the World War II armistice by next year. How will this, finally, before we let you go, how will this transatlantic Pacific partnership rearm Japan and give arms from the U.S. over to Asian countries, and not necessarily Asian countries who support us?
Well, you have to remember that the Japanese are invested very heavily in China. So while there's this great kabuki theater going on that makes you think that the Chinese and the Japanese hate each other, they're fighting over the Senkaku Islands, the fact of the matter is, beneath the surface, there's great economic integration between those two Asian giants. So we start, any weapons we give Japan, it's only a hop, skip, and a jump away from directly arming China.
Oh, wow. So, ladies and gentlemen, the global affairs begin to take effect on America as we know it. Curtis Ellis, thank you so much for joining us. I loved having the conversation. And will you come back with us if this bill comes close to passing? I don't know when it's going to be passing within Congress. Because if it's going to get a little media attention, you know how the Obama administration is. They just put a delay tactic out and like to make it disappear for a while.
Well, yeah, they certainly do. This could come up in the Senate as soon as next week, in fact, and I encourage everybody to go to our website, obamatrade.com, and on the front page of obamatrade.com in the right-hand column, there's a button you can push and send a message directly to Congress and tell them not to vote for this. In fact, you want them to vote against it. And they do listen to these when they get messages from the voters. They do listen.
And
I'd be happy to come back anytime.
All right, sounds great. Before we go, where can people get more information about your recent articles and more on the Transatlantic Pacific Partnership?
You can get more information on my articles at WND.com. That's WorldNet Daily, WND.com. And for more information about these horrible agreements here, the Trans-Pacific and the Transatlantic Partnership, go to obamatrade.com.
All right, Curtis, thanks so much. That's Curtis Ellis, everybody, of WorldNet Daily. Thank you so much, sir. Hope to have you back soon.
You bet. Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right, folks, and we'll be right back.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
In a moment, cancer changed our lives forever.
We were told nothing could be done to enjoy these final moments together.
But in that moment, when all seemed lost, St. Jude Children's Research Hospital gave us hope.
Because at this moment, St. Jude Children's Research Hospital is saving lives with pioneering research and care. We're changing the way the world treats childhood cancer by sharing our discoveries with doctors and scientists everywhere.
And we'll never have to pay St. Jude for anything, ever.
At this moment, she wants to be in her own bed.
I want to be back at school with my friends. I want to be outside playing.
Please take a moment and join St. Jude in finding cures and saving children. Visit stjude.org.
There are more than 3 million children in America's child protective and justice systems. Kids who've been abused, neglected, or traumatized. Kids who've begun to act out. The worst situations you can imagine. They've been told repeatedly they're worthless, messed up, or written off completely as a lost cause. For their safety and others, some of these children have to be removed from their homes, separated from their families. They're at the mercy of an overwhelmed system. Every 38 minutes, another troubled child is referred to Youth Villages. Youth Villages believes that no child is a lost cause, not a single one, because a stable, loving family can help any child succeed. And we have an 80% overall success rate that proves doing whatever it takes for children is the only thing that works. If you agree, find out how you can help at youthvillages.org.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
And welcome back to the Evan Miller Report. I'm Jason Miller. Your stock report in a moment. First, ladies and gentlemen, just like to thank Curtis Ellis for staying on a little extra time for us. I know he has a busy schedule as other interviews that he is doing today regarding this topic. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a trying time for America right now. We'll see what happens within the Senate next week as this possible transatlantic Pacific partnership bill gets fast-tracked over to the Senate. If it gets fast-tracked over to the Senate, that puts our country in deep trouble. We may not even have to worry about the 2016 presidential election cycle. This is exactly what Hillary Clinton wants. And guess what? This will be on President Obama's legacy, and it will be a positive way for him, but it will be negative on the American people. I suggest, ladies and gentlemen, if you have a little bit of money, you want to get more research on this, of course, go to the ObamaTrade.com, by all means, as Curtis suggested, but also go to turnthehelmpublishing.org and get Orlene Kurla's book by Stealth and Deception, The Transformation and Its Parallel to the European Union. I have read this book in detail, ladies and gentlemen, and it is mind-boggling. Orlene, our SHR Global Affairs correspondent, predicted that this would happen this year, and sure enough, it did happen this year. So I suggest you get this book, you read this book, you get yourself educated on this, because if this is passed, you need to be ready on how to deal with this as an American, because you think times are tough now, times are going to get tough later if this is passed. That's all I have to say on this. It's just a personal editorial. This is a personal recommendation. I'm not getting no money from advertising this book. It's just a suggestion for you, the listener, on trying to get more research and that you know what is going on in America. All right, now off to the stock report tonight. The S&P 500 was up 2,106. Well, that's 10 points. Or the Dow Jones Industrial was up 18,112, or 75 points, and the NASDAQ was up 5,011, or 33 plus points today. And those U.S. stocks closed higher today as oil hit highs for the new year, and investors continue to digest financial earnings and economic reports. The big highlight for today is energy, said Paul Nuttall, portfolio manager at Kingsview Asset Management. He continued to say, on the whole, the earnings numbers are a little better than expectations, and the economic data is keeping the Fed on the sidelines. Commodities settled at key levels, with crude oil ending up $3.10, or 5.82%, at $56.39 a barrel, its highest close of the year. Gold futures set tied up at $8.70 at $1,201.30 an ounce. If oil can post consecutive settlements above $56 a barrel, the commodity would be on track to break a second resistance level of $65 a barrel, according to BTIG's chief technical strategist Kate Stockton, who said intermediate-term momentum has been improving for WTI crude oil since February. The energy sector also rose more than 2% to lead the S&P 500 for a second day, as WTI crude oil as we stated, hit its highest level in 2015. Oil extended gains following the U.S. Energy Information Administration report a less than expected increase of 1.3 million, that's million with an M, ladies and gentlemen, in barrels in weekly inventories. The EIA numbers are very bullish. Phil Flynn, energy market analyst at Price Futures Group, said in an email. It indicates stronger demand and a smaller crude build may be a sign that the U.S. production is peaking. This comes after the International Energy Agency report shows a notable increase in demand, he said. Stocks extended gains slightly following the Federal Reserve's binge book noted improvements in residential real estate but reported overall moderate growth. Investors also cheered mostly positive corporate reports as earnings seasons began. The Nasdaq outperformed the major averages to close above the psychologically key 5,000 level. The Russell 2000, meanwhile, closed at a new high. The Dow Jones Industrial Average, as I stated, briefly gained more than 100 points and boosted by more than 4% in Intel after the bell on Tuesday. The blue chip reported earnings in line with estimates on revenue that missed, but said it expects to benefit from gains in its personal computer chips and in its data business. Before the open on Tuesday, Bank of America posted a first quarter profit, swinging from a surprise loss a year earlier, and took charge of $6 billion in litigation expenses. However, the bank saw a slight decline in its investment banking and liquidity and debit marketing business, while J.P. Morgan Chase reported investment banking fees and core trading revenues were both up about 20% over the year. And that's your stock report here on the Evan Miller Report. A couple business stories I do want to highlight briefly. Netflix Inc. said its video streaming service topped 62 million subscribers worldwide as originals show as House of Cards, the new television program House of Cards, drew new viewers globally. The shares soared to a record high. U.S. subscribers jumped by 2.28 million in the first quarter, while international counts rose 2.6 million, according to the Latos Gatos, California-based company. Meanwhile, U.S. fast food workers marked tax day today, demanding higher wages. Fast food workers rallied in New York on Wednesday to demand higher pay using the April 15th deadline for filing U.S. tax returns to publicize their claim that they cannot survive on the hourly wages paid by many U.S. corporations. And ladies and gentlemen, I know we didn't have time for our D.C. news today, so what I will do is I will be posting our stories that we're going to be that we would have highlighted on tonight's Evan Miller Report on our Facebook page, facebook.com/The Evan Miller Report. But I believe that a conversation with Curtis Ellis was too important to let go aside, ladies and gentlemen. So we hope that you have enjoyed this edition of the Evan Miller Report here on the SHR Media Network. I'm Jason Miller. Coming up next, the national weather with Darren Bennett from the BBC Met Office. Have a great evening, everybody.
As well. This cloud has already had around it some really gusty winds that have caused a few problems around the Rockies, and it's still producing a mixture of rain and some snow as well. And that's going to bump into this very warm, muggy air that's feeding up from the Gulf of Mexico and intensify the rain here across many southern parts of the United States during Thursday and possibly into Friday too. A bit quieter further north and towards the west too. We've still got this mixture of rain and some snow across British Columbia, but Vancouver's likely to be dry. And all the way down the western side of the United States, it's dry and quite sunny. The rain and snow, the gusty winds moving away from Salt Lake City. The drought continues in California. Should be dry for eastern Canada, the northeast of the US, but we could see some showery rain pushing up into the Midwest, so a change here. But it's really in the deep south that we're going to find these ferocious thunderstorms, torrential rain in a short space of time, leading to some flooding. And that risk continues through Friday and perhaps into Saturday as well.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.